On behalf of all the conference organizers, I would like to welcome you to the 10th Annual Health and Humanitarian Logistics Conference. We are delighted that you could be here with us today on this 10-year celebration of our conference. My name is Pınar Keskin-Ocak. I'm a faculty member at Rojetech, and I also direct the Center for Health and Humanitarian Systems. This morning, together with my colleague Julie Swan, who is sitting right there, we will be your hosts for the morning program. So the conference has traveled around the world. It started in Atlanta in 2009, and the first 3 years we were in Atlanta. And then we started traveling around the world to different countries, different continents, and we've had the honor and pleasure of working with a number of wonderful organizations who collaborated with us to host the conference over the past many years. So here you can see the list here, and it's a pleasure to be here this on this 10th year anniversary here in Dubai. And we are grateful to the International Humanitarian City for their collaboration as we prepared for this conference. Giuseppe Saba, who is the CEO of IHC, was with us during the pre-conference tour yesterday. He unfortunately could not join us today because he's traveling, but we have some of the IHC representatives here with us this morning. So we are already planning for next year, 2019. We did not set the location yet, but you will be receiving a link for a survey. So please share with us your thoughts, suggestions about the 2019 conference location, as well as potential topics for the conference, potential speakers, any other ideas. We would love to hear from you. So please be on the lookout for the survey that you will receive. Just a little bit of background about how this conference started. The first year, the focus of the conference was primarily on the humanitarian systems. Given that we have an increasing number of disasters, not only in the number, but also in the intensity and the number of people they affect, we focused our first year on humanitarian systems, both for response, but also for preparedness and for recovery, and also for development efforts, so that if we prepare better, in the long run, we may be able to handle such events more efficiently and effectively. But very quickly after that, the conference scope expanded to include health systems, focusing on health system strengthening so that we can deliver better service to the population on an ongoing basis, whether it's disease prevention or surveillance or screening or treatment, just focusing on all of these activities to be able to have a better life for people, happy and healthy lives for people. And then we combine these with some of the other humanitarian topics as well, so the conference now spans both areas. And more importantly, this is one of the very few conferences that looks at the intersection and the connection between health and humanitarian systems. As we have seen in some of these recent health emergencies, such as the Ebola crisis, the two systems really need to work together to respond to such emergencies. So in addition to the health systems in an ongoing basis, we also look at health emergencies as part of the conference program. And the objectives, again, to address some of these issues in health and humanitarian systems, to share ideas, best practices, and sometimes maybe not so good practices, so we learn from each other based on our experiences. Of course, you will have a lot of opportunity for networking, and hopefully the conference will help you generate some new ideas. And then we also hope that the conference may help the decision makers, policy makers to set agendas, the funding agencies to set priorities about how they allocate their funds, given all of the discussion that's happening at the conference and the priority areas identified by the speakers and the participants. We have a number of plenary sessions, a keynote speaker, oral presentations, poster sessions, and so on. And we also have a conference tour to the International Humanitarian City. We had a pre-conference tour yesterday. It was fantastic. So you can see a couple of pictures from the tour yesterday. And then there is going to be a tour on Thursday as well. So if you have not signed up already, please do so. I'm not sure if we still have space, but at least you may be on a waiting list in case some people change their plans. All right, so putting together a conference like this takes a lot of time and effort from various people. So I would like to recognize our conference program committee. I don't know if they are in the room, but if they are, please stand. Karmit Kedam from John Snow. David Sarli. I know David is somewhere here. Thank you, David. Esther Ndichu from UPS. Okay, maybe not yet. George Fenton from HLA. Prashant Yadav. I know I saw Prashant in the morning. And Paulo Gonçalves. Paulo, I know you are here somewhere. Here we go. So many thanks to our conference program committee who worked very hard in lining up topics and speakers and making sure that we put together a wonderful program, which I hope you'll enjoy. And there are many, many other people who work behind the scenes and sometimes in the front lines to make the conference possible. You can think about so many details to take care of. And we also would like to acknowledge them. They come from a variety of organizations, including Georgia Tech, IHC, Helms Briscoe, 24 Degrees LLC, and of course our program committee, several student volunteers from local universities, and of course many thanks to all of you, our speakers and participants, for being with us here at this conference. So let's give all of them a big hand for making this possible. And I'm going to recognize one person in particular. Probably all of you in the room have interacted with her at least once, maybe multiple times. This is Jocelyn Cooper. Really, without her, this conference would not have been possible. Jocelyn?
Hello.
Lights shining on you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for all your hard work. And in addition to all the hard work from many, many people, putting together a conference like this also requires resources. So this conference and our past conferences, they would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors. So we are grateful to the sponsors for this year's conference. As I read the name of the sponsoring company or organization, representatives from that company or organizations, if you could please stand and remain standing so we can recognize you. UPS or UPS Foundation, any representatives? Thank you. Pfizer, representatives from Pfizer? Thank you. Chemonex. Mission Pharma. NC State. I know we have Julie here. PwC. All the way in the back, thank you. And Georgia Tech. Okay, I know I'm here, and we have a couple others. So many thanks once again to our sponsors for their financial support and also for being here with us to support us during the conference as well. I would like to give a special thanks to UPS and UPS Foundation. They've been special because they've been with us for 10 years in a row, straight. They did not waver in their support. They've been with us every year. And the conference certainly would not have been possible to start and to continue without their support. So let's give another big hand to UPS for their continuing support of the conference. They have a stand outside, so you will have an opportunity to meet some of their representatives and to learn about their activities in the health and humanitarian system space. Okay, so where are you all coming from? From all over the world. You can see the dots spread around, and this is very typical for our conference. Every year we see a similar pattern, not exactly the same pattern, but just a number of people from all over the world. So we are very, very pleased that the conference gives us the opportunity to bring so many people, so many perspectives from so many different places together. And organizations represented. Believe it or not, we have over 120 organizations, companies represented at the conference. The count may have increased because as we prepared the slides, we were not finished with the registration yet, but it is a very, very nice group, again, bringing together different perspectives. So we hope there's gonna be a lot of networking, sharing of ideas, and hopefully you'll be able to leave the conference with lots of insight and ideas moving forward. All right, since I'm a professor, I like to give homework, and this homework was actually prepared by my colleague Julie Swan. She's the one usually giving the homework, but this time it ended up being my duty to do this. So as you go through the program, as you interact with your co-participants, please think about some actions you might want to take after the conference. So we don't want this to be an event where we just get together, talk, and leave, but we want this to be an event where we can hopefully turn some of these ideas into action and impact. So think about what you can do individually, what you can encourage your colleagues, your organization to do, thinking about the impact you might have through these actions for your organization and for the constituents that your organization serves. So hopefully it will turn into action, and if it does, please get in touch with us and share with us. We would love to hear from you. All right, so here's a quick preview of our agenda for the morning. Again, I'm not gonna go through details because you have it in your packets. But next in the program, in the agenda, we have our welcome address by Caroline Farage, and my colleague Julie Swan is going to do the introduction. Julie, if you could please come to the podium.
Thank you, Pinar. Now, for most of our speakers, you have their bios in your program, but you don't have it for Ms. Caroline Farage, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She's here representing the International Humanitarian City, where she's a board member. In addition, her main job day-to-day is that she's the VP of Arabic Services for CNN. Ms. Farage is a journalist, and she's a journalist who has covered many wars, refugees, conflicts, and many other things that are relevant for you here today. So she has overseen CNN Arabic during a time of a lot of upheaval, including the US-led invasion of Iraq, the Arabic Spring, and the rise of ISIS. Before joining CNN, she was also a senior political reporter for Al Raj, the leading Arabic daily newspaper in Jordan, and many other publications. So just one small piece of the work that she's done. For example, she covered the Kurdish area in Iraq when there were reports of chemical weapons there, and so many refugees and children were fleeing from that area. And you know, in these kinds of events, sometimes speakers will play videos, and if you're an empathetic type, sometimes those videos make you want to cry because you see the pictures of the children and the refugees and all of those kinds of things. So like few of us have done this probably, but I believe that Ms. Farage is responsible for making people cry sometimes when she is reporting on these intense areas. So I would like to ask your help in welcoming Ms. Caroline Farage to the speaker.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good morning, everybody. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dubai. I'm deeply pleased that all of you have been able to join us here in Dubai. Your choice to be present here, and at this time of the year, despite, of course, the heat, is itself a symbol of remarkable role Dubai has gained in the recent years. Thanks to the wise leadership of the UAE and the initiatives of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President, Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai. I believe organizing the 10th Humanitarian and Health Logistics Conference here also comes in line with the objective of the International Humanitarian City to connect humanitarian actors and develop humanitarian leadership. It is a fact that the Emirate of Dubai has become a model for global, cosmopolitan, and futuristic city, being at the very heart of development, technology, and openness. Dubai stands out in the area of connecting importers and exporters in the global markets, a fact boosted by its many ports and airports. This favorable place of Dubai as a significant player in trading and transport logistics has indeed contributed to the growth of the International Humanitarian City. And as you know, International Humanitarian City has become a reliable destination and host of the many humanitarian communities here. In 2017, UAE was ranked for the 5th year the world's largest donor of the official development aid, of course, relative to its gross national income. And the International Humanitarian City, the best kept secret of Dubai, as some like to also call it, has definitely played a huge role in achieving that. Strategically located in Dubai, close to Al Maktoum Airport and Jebel Ali Port, the International Humanitarian City has the ability to move shipments from sea to air in as less as 10 minutes. The infrastructure, location, and world-class logistics services boost the capacity of the International Humanitarian City and its community to respond timely and efficiently to any humanitarian emergency, including, of course, the event of any pandemics. The International Humanitarian City, indeed, the translation of the will of UAE leaders to support the international community and to open more horizons for them in order to shape a better world. The essence of its existence is to facilitate emergency response, in addition to addressing the challenges and dilemmas faced in the humanitarian field. And as you may have heard, that the International Humanitarian City future is earmarked by the expansion plan envisioned by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed. The facility currently is up to, it's 127,000 square meter. It's planning to be triple in 2022. And I know some of you have already visited the International Humanitarian City, and some are planning to visit today. So I hope also the rest who are not able to attend and to visit in the future. But I can assure you that whatever you see now is different, and whatever you will see in the future, it will become even way more different. And on behalf, finally, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the International Humanitarian City Board and the Board of Directors chaired by Her Royal Highness Princess Haya bint Al Hussein, wife of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, and she's at the same time the UN Messenger of Peace, as you all know, let me express again our profound appreciation to your presence. And I would like also to include by asking you to enjoy Dubai and ignore the heat and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faraj, for your important role as a journalist and for representing the International Humanitarian Society today. My next introduction is for Mr. Yagan Chapagain, and you have his bio in your booklet, so you can flip through and look at it if you would like. Mr. Chapagain is the Under-Secretary General for Programs and Operation at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, or IFRC. Now, I'm not going to read to you the details of his bio because I know that you can all read for yourself, but he has been Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific and has provided leadership in responding to large-scale humanitarian crises over much of the world, but especially Asia-Pacific, Central Asia, and other areas. So please join with me in recognizing our keynote speaker, Mr. Yagan Chapagain.
Good morning. It's really great to be here with all of you. One thing I want to add on my introduction is I'm not an expert on any of the topics we will be discussing today and tomorrow. I consider myself more of a practitioner. I come from an organization who has worked on all these situations, and I myself had an opportunity to have a practical experience working in the field, in the regional office, and now in the headquarters. So whatever I will be sharing here would be from the perspective of a practitioner. And I hope some of this you will find very, very useful. Before I start, I was also reminded sometimes the technology is great. This morning, the Facebook reminded that today would have been the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela, one of the greatest leader of the last century, and one of the greatest human beings who have inspired a lot of people, including myself, to come into this field and do my best to make a small difference in whatever capacity I can. So it was also a great opportunity. I don't know whether you planned it to time it that way, but it's a great day to have this conference starting here in International Humanitarian City on the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela. Today, I will try to touch on some of these issues in next 1 hour. Again, 1 hour will not be enough to get into the details of some of these issues, but I hope what I can do during this 1 hour is to put a context which hopefully will provide you a bit of a basis to continue the discussions today and tomorrow. So I will be sharing some of the basic foundational informations from a perspective of an organization who actually is working in the field day to day in the communities through its 191 member national societies around the world. I think there was already mentioned, there was a mention of already the global humanitarian context, and let me spend just few minutes just to put into the context that, what type of world we are living in today. I was reading a quote from Bill Gates somewhere, where he had mentioned that, if you really look into the history of humankind, this is probably the best time to be in this earth. When you look at the economic prosperity, you could see, the educational advances, the scientific advances we have made, the wealth we have created around the world, the health facilities we have around the world, the sports progress we have made around the world, literature, everything. This is probably the best time to be in the world when you look at the history. And I agree with him. But at the same time, we are probably not where we should be. This is probably the best time to be in the world for people like us who are in this room. But it's probably not for everybody. While we have made this huge progress in last century, it hasn't unfortunately reached number of people, and I just wanted to put that context in front of us. When you look at some of these mega trends on climate change, urbanization, demographic shifts happening, I think this doesn't require a lot of introduction. But it's very important that when we look into some of these trends, of course, we focus a lot on the natural disasters, and organization who focuses on natural disasters, of course, very, very important. But what is also important is that in each of these elements, how they are impacting the health. A lot of times we, of course, talk about natural disasters or the conflict, but in each of these contexts, the health becomes a very, very critical element. How climate change is impacting on the health, how urbanization is impacting on the health, and how demographic shifts in different countries, looking from the Western Europe and Japan versus some of the developing world in Asia and Africa, the demography is totally different. You know, when you look at Japan, where the aging population is so big versus Africa, where the youth population is so big. So these are some of the things to keep in mind while we move forward. Protracted and complex conflicts, of course, and I put the word there, world disorder. You know, you hear a lot the world order, but the best way to describe the situation is world disorder. And one of the reasons why I use the word disorder is, when you look at the war, say 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, the wars had a definition. You know, there were two countries, there was a declaration of war, and there were places assigned to go and fight the war, there were armies, and there were lot clarity on who is fighting whom, and the armies. There was a chain of command on those armies. Now, when you look at the wars today, it's very, very different. Very, very different type of wars. Now, the wars are fought on the street, they are fought on the schools, and they are fought on masjids, they are fought on churches, they are fought on temples, and they are even fought now in the hospitals. The healthcare workers used to be safe. When you put a Red Cross logo, they used to be safe. The army didn't target them. Now, you cannot be really sure. You are a healthcare worker, you could still be targeted. We have our own experience in Syria. More than 70 Red Crescent volunteers have been killed. They were not equipped, they were not armed, they were not trying to kill anybody, they were not fighting with anybody. The only thing they were trying to do was help people who needed help. More than 70 killed. Volunteers killed in Nigeria, volunteers killed in Palestine. So there is a very different type of wars. And of course now when you look at the new wars with the drones and the robots fighting a war, the whole international humanitarian law, the laws of the war, we really need to keep in mind that how does this affect the world order? And of course in all these situations, of course when you look at the conflict, of course we generally think of fighting, but how this impacts the health facilities, the health workers, and the impact it has on people, and the logistics that's required to ensure that the basic healthcare services can be run. It's extremely important to put that into that perspective. Of course, the migration and displacement, I know you are going to talk about it a bit later. Again, the important element here is how this is impacting the normal humanitarian and development work, both on the health sector, but also on the logistics. This was one of the things we experienced a couple of years ago when the people started moving and our colleagues started planning, how do we help these people? How do we put the supply chain system? And it was very difficult. The traditional way of organizing a supply chain just didn't work because people were moving from place to place and people were moving from different countries to different countries where there are different laws and there are different tolerance of accepting people or not accepting people. And it created a very different dynamics which we were not prepared for. There was also very interesting lessons we learned during the migration crisis was what people are looking for. I had an opportunity to visit some of those in the Eastern Europe to visit people moving. And generally, our perception is that people are asking for food or maybe water or even medicines. And that was not the first thing people are asking for. You know what people were asking for? Guess. phone charging facility, mobile phone, smartphone charging facility. That was the number one thing people were asking, because they were moving. They wanted to get in touch with their friends and families. And that was their number one preoccupation, because when they were moving, the battery ran out. The connection stopped. They didn't know how to connect. That was the number one thing. And then it was water and other things. And that forced a big change in our thinking. So I'm mentioning this because this is also bringing a totally new element of our response, which we hadn't thought a few years ago. Of course, the global humanitarian system, I think there was a mention already before, many actors, many systems, but not well-resourced and probably too thinly spread. And growing caseload, I think you will see the numbers mentioned by many speakers moving forward. It's under huge pressure. Of course, when we have the needs increasing, there is also the increase in the humanitarian actors, the development actors. And I think the coordination and cooperation has become a big challenge. And I was looking into one of the objectives of this conference was really learning from each other, sharing with each other, networking with each other, and developing partnerships with each other is extremely important. Many times we are reinventing the wheels. Some organizations have already done it, practiced it, but then because we don't share enough, there is a reinventing of the wheels happening. So how do we actually ensure that there is a good coordination and learning so that we become more effective and efficient? And then, of course, the explosion in information and communication technologies, how we can benefit from the advancement of the technology in our supply chain management, in our health work, and of course in many other areas of work. But also important aspect of this is how this is impacting on the next point, that's the greater demand for accountability. Of course, there is a much greater demand for accountability from our donors, from our partners. There is a much greater demand of accountability from our own staff. When we are getting people of this generation, I don't know, X generation or Y generation or Z generation, they have a very different motivation of accountability. And they are expecting the organizations behave in a certain way. And if we are not delivering or the leadership is not aware of those expectations, we get into difficulty. But also the information technology and the social media has created a very different demand on accountability. What happens around the world gets spread very quickly. And of course, sometimes this can also be spread in a negative way, not always in a positive way. So these are some of the things to keep in mind. And I wanted to share this because this is so important on the topic we are discussing this week, on the whole public health system. How do we respond to public health emergencies? And how do we actually respond to this new environment in our overall humanitarian logistics and supply chain management? I was giving that quote before from Bill Gates saying that this is the best time to be on earth, and I agree with him, but for many of these people, it's unfortunately still not the best time to be on earth. These are some of the statistics I want to share with you. 700 million people live on less than $2 a day. $2, not much. But the other number, about 71% of the world population live on $10 a day. Of course, there is a lot of focus on 2. But when you look at the 10, and in many parts of the world, $10 is not that much. And 71% of the population today lives on that. 1 billion people live in urban slums and could double by 2030. And urban slum, extremely important. Most of them, these are unplanned. There are a lot of health issues. Water and sanitation systems are not proper. That impacts on the health. That impacts on the whole logistics systems that may be needed to respond to the slum situations. And a lot of time, these are also illegally built, meaning that a lot of the normal supply systems are not in place because they are not fully legal, they are not fully registered. And it creates its own dynamics. More than 1 billion people in developing countries have inadequate access to water. And you know, when there is inadequate access to water, what happens to the health situation. 815 million people around the world go to bed hungry every day, every night. They go to bed hungry. And of course, there is a flip side of this. There's almost 1 billion people in the world are suffering from obesity. So we have this strange situation where we have almost 1 billion people who need to go to bed hungry every evening, and we have about 1 billion people who actually are suffering from the consequences of obesity. And imagine the stress that puts on the health systems of countries, even the rich countries, even the developed countries. The stress it puts on the health system is incredible. Over 205 million people are affected by weather-related disasters, and 98% of them in the developing world. Around 37 million people are living with HIV even today, 5,000 infections a day. That's, again, you don't hear HIV much on the news anymore because of other pandemics, but this is still a major issue. And the last point sort of breaks the heart. Over 15,000 children under 5 die daily from preventable diseases like malaria and diarrhea. That's 1 every 6 seconds. That's 1 child dies every second from a fully preventable diseases. And with the wealth of today, and with the education advancement of today, with the technology of today, when we have to lose a child under 5 every second, this is clearly not the world we want to have on 21st century. And I think each of us have a responsibility to contribute in whatever small way we can, hopefully to change this. And I think you in this room have, I think, a very, very important role to make a difference. Now, of course, the one of the challenges of this, and I'm sure of interest to you and a very big interest to us as an organization, as an International Red Cross, have been, of course, the recent developments, of course, made big because of the Ebola in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, Zika outbreak, of course, and of course the recent outbreak of Ebola in Democratic Republic of Congo. Luckily, that was contained, I believe, relatively well. I hope it is fully contained because I think we haven't seen new cases emerging for the last few weeks. But this has brought into this awareness now in the world of the pandemics, and how this can affect the world. And I really wanted to quote on my own boss, El Hassi. He's my boss. He's Secretary General of International Federation. And he has repeated this many times. No one is safe until everyone is safe in the pandemic situation. Because of the interconnected world of today, a thing that happens in one location spreads out very, very quickly all over the world. And as we saw during the Ebola crisis, and even in DRC now, what happened a couple of months ago, a few weeks ago, and we were with other organizations were monitoring. If this Ebola had contaminated the water, the rivers that flows along DRC, a number of countries bordering DRC, it could have spread very, very quickly. Now, what happens is, one is, of course, there is a real threat of spread. But there is also a real threat of panic, how governments respond. Suddenly something happens and the government starts shutting down the airports and diverting the flights. And it creates, there is a real threat, but also there is a created perception of fear that really creates a massive a situation of general public who suffers both from fear of the real threat, but also who suffer from the perception that gets created with the panic response from different organizations. I will come back to this, why it is important. This was not supposed to come this way, but clearly my technology was not very good when I put these slides together. And I wanted to share this because when we are discussing the public health emergencies of today, from small to big ones, there are some of the challenges we have seen from the practice of different crises in last decade or so. One is, weak national detection and response capacities in many, many countries. Even today, there are many, many countries in the world who have very, very weak detection and response capacities. And then, at the same time, what we also saw was limited surge capacity regionally and internationally. And these first 2 points I put together, because it's so important to look into when it is a public health emergency which has a potential of becoming pandemics or epidemic or pandemic, it's very important to look both from the national level but also from the international level. Because suddenly what looks like a local crisis becomes a regional crisis and international crisis very, very quickly. And we saw that both the national detection capacity being very weak, but also the international capacity to respond very, very weak. And especially in situations like Ebola. I can tell you 3 years ago when Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone was happening, a lot of the organizations were actually leaving the country because of the fear that it could affect their own staff, it could affect their own personnel. So I remember a meeting in Geneva when people were talking, some of the donors were talking about coordination challenges in the Ebola crisis, and we said, actually there is not much of a coordination challenge because people are actually leaving, not rushing in, unlike in natural disasters, when a lot of organizations are rushing into the countries. And this is extremely important, that awareness and the trainings and equipping people in a right way so that there is no fear to be deployed, but also we ensure that the safety of the people deployed are ensured, because we could be putting people at risk if we deploy them without proper preparation and without proper logistics. One of the things we notice now in DRC Congo, Ebola response, even after the experience we had, and I believe generally a positive, successful experience in the previous Ebola outbreak, we realized that our logistics was not fully prepared. In DRC, when the epidemics was spread into such remote areas, very inaccessible areas, we struggled with our logistics. So even with the very recent experience of 3 years ago, we struggled. Now, the third point is assertion of sovereignty versus the global solidarity. You know, the many, many countries now are asserting their national sovereignty, that we are an independent country. We want to lead what happens in our country. Versus when you are on a pandemic situation, of course, this could very quickly be a regional and global issue, that solidarity that is needed globally and the capacities that we need to pull together, they come into collision. And if these relationships are not established beforehand, and I think the international rules and regulations that have been agreed by all these governments have not been practiced before the crisis happens, we face into this situation. So a lot of times when we wait until the crisis happens, really creates challenges, because this will get stronger and stronger. The governments are asserting more and more, not only on natural disasters, but in health crisis actually even more. They are asserting, and I think that's dynamic is not going to change. I think the governments will only be stronger, asserting strongly. So investing beforehand on building those relationships and ensuring that the international health regulations have been implemented by the countries before the crisis happens is extremely, extremely important. Centralized control versus community engagement. You know, there is again that tension that, you know, when a crisis happens, the tendency is let's go and centralize control from either the national capital or regional capital or even globally, versus a need for community to engage. That tension will always be there. And it's extremely important that they don't become a problem. They become complementary, because for these crises to be responded effectively, the community engagement will be extremely important, because the detection happens in the communities. It will be the people in the communities who would be suffering from these consequences, but also these are the people who have the knowledge of what happens in the community. And if there is a tension between the local community and the authorities at the regional or the capital level, actually we will have a problem. So building that relationship and having a community prepared and well educated and having that relationship would be extremely important. And I think, of course, in the pandemic situations, the issue around the regulatory approvals becomes very, very critical. I think in the next panel discussion, some of this will come, and I know the colleagues who know this much better than I do will be talking about it. And of course, the global health financing and governance. I think the health financing is a big, big issue. Even many countries now, even if they are not very rich from the financial terms, a lot of the countries have resources. But how these countries are prioritizing those resources become a very, very big issue. I have dealt in the countries where, the health facilities don't even have paracetamol, but those countries are investing on building 500,000 army, or are investing on even developing the weapon system that are really not needed. How the governments are prioritizing, how the donors are prioritizing, how different organizations, the private sector are prioritizing their financing becomes very, very important. But also when that financing is made available. When 3 years ago, when the Ebola crisis happened, if the international community had released 100 million in March of that year, and we as Red Cross had managed to release 1 million, and we are actually told that we overreacted when we did that in March, that crisis could have been averted. But everybody waited until August when it became such a big issue. And then the donors ended up spending tens of billions of dollars to contain that. So when the financing is made available becomes extremely important. A timely investment, investment on preparedness, investment on detection, investment on monitoring would prevent. But of course, sometimes not everything can be prevented. But if a financing is made available, timely basis, quickly manner, a huge amount of financial savings, lives could be saved. Life could be saved, of course, the most important. But money could also be saved. That money could be used to help all those numbers I shared with you before. So these are some of the challenges. But if we come together, the challenges could be turned into opportunities. It has the two sides, yin and yang. The challenges, but they could also be opportunity if we take action. Now, some of the, from the organization like us, who are very community-based with our 191 national societies and close to 200,000 local branches in the communities, for us, the community perspective becomes extremely, extremely important. So, of course, some of the things I share here could be very, very relevant to the organization like us, and maybe not to everybody, but I just wanted to share some of the strategies we believe should be adopted to address the public health emergencies are here. And mainly, some of these strategies are here mainly because when a disease outbreak happens, which has epidemic and pandemic potential, it doesn't become only health issue. Health in inverted comma, in a narrow sense. It disrupts food production. It disrupts, the routine health care. It disrupts economic security. It disrupts trade. It disrupts education. It disrupts transport system. So what is considered a health in a narrow sense becomes a major problem which affects the entire ecosystem of a community or a society or a country. So we need to put this into perspective when there is a disease outbreak or public health emergency of that potential. So what we believe is some of the approaches that are already existing, these are not creation of the Red Cross. What we believe would be, taking a whole of society approach, connecting the local actors, the community actors, the civil society organizations, the private sector, with the local authorities, with the regional authorities, with the national authorities, and of course with the international system. Having that whole of society approach becomes extremely, extremely important. And we believe that we need to put the communities at the center because this gets detected in the communities. It affects the local communities and it gets controlled in the communities. At the end of the day, it's the communities, it's the local communities, it's the host communities who are actually in the middle of all these things. So that's why putting those communities at the center of our action in preparing, in preventing, in preparing, and also putting them at the center on our action becomes extremely, extremely important. And of course, having this approach of the One Health, the multi-sectoral approach of One Health, which sort of looks into the aspects of people's health, but also looks into the aspects of animal health and the health of the environment overall together. I think we really need to put that into perspective, stop looking from a narrow point of view. Because in many countries, the animal health is so closely associated with the people's health. And this is something I learned myself during my time in Asia, Mongolia. Every year, not almost every year, they have Jud, this very extreme winter. And, we have been supporting these people who gets affected by extreme winter with different interventions. But what we found out was that when you really go and talk to the people, they are so concerned about their animals because their livelihood and their food, their health is dependent on having the animals. And this is a program we have been doing now for many, many years, that when we respond to the jute crisis in Mongolia, we are also responding to the needs of the animals so the animals don't die. Because if they lose the animals, that's their food, that's their livelihood. So that's why it's extremely important. Third thing, of course, is the overall environment. And our actions to address an immediate need could have a significant impact on the environment, which could actually make the health crisis worse moving forward. So somebody was telling me, an expert was telling me, Ebola virus, it kills us, but it doesn't kill the animals, certain animals, So when we started encroaching, when we started encroaching the livelihoods of the animals, which is the forests. So these viruses who used to live safely on the animals started transferring to us. Then the animals can easily live with those viruses, but we cannot. That's why, keeping into perspective the impact on the environment of our action becomes equally important. So whole of society approach, putting the communities at the center, and having One Health as a guiding principle for our interventions on public health emergencies would be extremely important because they encompass much wider area of human life and the communities. And of course, the one thing what we are finding is, of course, when the crisis happens, like Ebola happened, Zika happened, now again Ebola in DRC, the international system, of course, responds. And the response probably will always be needed. Some of these crises will unfortunately keep on happening, and the international system will need to come together to support this crisis. But if we invest on the public health system in the countries, in the communities, in the local authorities, hopefully the need for this very expensive and not always very effective international response could be minimized. And that's where investment on the public health system becomes extremely, extremely important. Capacity building, local or international, that's what I meant. We always need to keep some international capacity, absolutely will be needed. But I think it will be much more smart and much more effective if we invest on the capacity building at the local level, local hospitals, the communities, training community health volunteers, having that capacity in, having basic health education in the education curriculum. That makes a huge difference. That makes a huge difference on prevention, on detection, and in monitoring. Of course, the enhancing health systems in the countries, financing, making sure that there is sufficient financing is made available at the local level, at the regional level. Putting a decent, having a decent infrastructure, basic infrastructure. I have been to many villages in many countries, mostly in Asia and Europe, now also in Africa. Basic infrastructure doesn't exist. When you talk about blockchain and now the drones and all these type of things, of course, we should take advantage of the new technology. But we should also be mindful that there are many parts in the world, the basic infrastructure doesn't exist. Basic facility to storage medicine don't exist. The electricity doesn't exist. Even if it exists, it goes 12 hours a day. or sometimes 15 hours a day, 16 hours a day. How do you preserve medicine in those contexts? The vaccines, how do you present? So these are some of the basic investment on infrastructure. It's very, very critical. Research, and I think I see some of the universities here, and I think you know much better importance of research, continuing research. I think the research cannot stop. The innovation that needs to happen, the research, the knowledge sharing continuously needs to happen. And of course, the research can be expensive. Research cannot happen without cost. It doesn't happen without investment. So that investment available, and it's great to see, you know, when I got the invitation to come here and I was looking into who is involved, I was very excited because this is such a combination of practitioners who actually work on the field in the last mile delivery versus the researchers, you know, the academics. And that was very interesting. That made me very, very interested to be part of this exercise here, because it's so important and they are so interconnected. Of course, the incident management systems, even with all this investment, unfortunately, there will be situations, incidents will happen, the public health crisis will come, epidemics, unfortunately, will come. So we need to be prepared. And putting those incident management systems at the national level, is extremely important. National level, regional level, and at the local level. And in that, it's very important in the incident management system to have a defined role of local actors in the communities, local NGOs, local civil society organizations. The traditional systems, you know, in many countries there are traditional systems, traditional healers, existing in those countries. The religious leaders, extremely important to have those in place. I remember many years ago in the 90s, I was working in Tajikistan, and there was this typhoid epidemic because of the water system was polluted. And the government was in the middle of civil war, so we had to respond. And we were trying to get health messages there. You know, how to use water. What are the safe practices of using water? You know, boil water before you drink. You know, basic messages. And it was so difficult. And the epidemic was growing. And somebody told us, you know, somebody from our staff told us, guys, why don't you go to Imam? You know, the religious leader there. And I said, oh, but we are Red Cross, we know we don't mix up with the religions and things like that. And we had a bit of an internal discussion. I said, no, we are not doing religion here. We are just trying to use the expertise and the relationship of the local religious leader. And we went and approached the religious leaders there. And we conveyed the messages, and we said, listen, this is very, very important. And these leaders understood that they could make a difference. And I can tell you, getting those messages across through the local religious leader was 500 times more effective than with all our experts we brought from Geneva and everywhere around the world. So having those elements and making them inside. And again, I'm not saying that all the practices are right practices. There could be wrong practices also in the communities. But the best way to change some of those practices is through engagement and through education, by listening and by sharing. And through those engagements, we can also change some of those practices. So defining the role of the local actors is extremely important. Role of the private sector, and it's great to see that the private sector is so strong here in this room and clearly been a very critical resource behind this conference initiative. Extremely important. I think the private sector can play a much bigger role in humanitarian setting, development setting, and in health crisis from different, not only from money. You know, a lot of times, of course, when you look at the private sector, we look at the money only. No, the innovations, the technology, the leadership and management ability the private sector has successfully practiced. Some of those things could be also extremely useful, and frankly, on the whole logistics capacity, you know, the UPS, great. You know, we are trying to learn from you guys. Some of the things you have been using. So extremely important to have the role of the private sector. And the final point I wanted to make here was the special needs of fragile states. Of course, we can have systems globally, but every country is different. Every country's capacity is different, every country's different dynamics between different ministries is different. And so that's what we need to keep that in mind. But particularly, we need to keep in mind the special needs of fragile states, because they are going through a very, very difficult time. A lot of time, the fragility comes because of the geopolitics of the region, or sometimes also the global. Sometimes it happens from a very complex relationship with different communities. Sometimes this is linked to religion. Sometimes just linked to various dynamics in the community. And of course, because they are in the fragile context, their economic security is very, very weak. A lot of the infrastructures, the rules, regulations, procedures, systems are very, very weak. So a very special attention needs to be paid. And I think the organizations like us and a lot of the other organizations, the funding organizations, need to keep in mind that we need to have a slightly different approach when we are addressing the public health system in the fragile context. Now, I just wanted to show you a little video. I gave some of these examples. Some of the what's the global context? What are some of the challenges the current world is facing when it comes to the public health emergency? Some of the strategies that could be adopted to address some of these issues, and of course, some of the ways we can actually address, strengthen the investment on the public health system. I just want to pause now a little bit and show you a little video. It also gives me a bit of a space to take a sip of water. This is a video done by one of our member national societies from Canadian Red Cross, and this came just out from our activities in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where you have people fleeing Myanmar and living in a very extremely difficult and crowded conditions in Cox's Bazar. Almost 1 million people living in a very, very crowded, congested, and really difficult. In my now almost 25 years of humanitarian work, I have been to many, many settlements where people are living. This was one of the most difficult one I witnessed myself personally. So this is just a video to see that some of the work organizations like us are doing. I'm sure you have similar story to share. Okay, now I have to make this work. Can we get the line?
দেশত মানে কি ঘর বাড়িলে তাই ভাবছিলাম, আলসাজ করে হাইবাজিলাম, কেতে হলা করে হাইবাজিলাম, কুরাঁচ ফালে হাইবাজিলাম। মানুষ বাইরে বার হুয়ারে শেষ আমার আড়াই লই যায় এত গর্গিনের মধ্যে অন্ধারা দি ফেলে। অত আলগর জিদে আলম মাদের আজার গিদ্দে দান আগরি দান লালয়ে তারা তিনের দূরে তেরি আজাগো ভাজি দানো না কি আর মা বাবা মারি ফেলাই কি আর হুজ্জি মারি ফেলাই কি আর জামাই হরে ধরে লেগে তুই না ভাই খবর না ভাই জিওর দিয়ে না মারি ফেলাই না খেঙ্গছে মানুষ খবর নাই।
The numbers of people that are involved, that have been affected by this whole incident, if you can call it something so minor, is massive. I hope that people have seen the pictures, some of the footage of miles and miles and miles of tents, and every single one of those tents and shelters has someone in it, has a family in it that has experienced all kinds of unimaginable trauma, tragedy, loss. And we're here doing what we can to alleviate some of that. We're trying to improve their access to healthcare by going in as mobile clinics and going deep into the camps where there are no other or few other healthcare services for these people. The thing that is kind of shocking to me is to be here and see what's going on all around us. And it's so gigantic. And yet at home, it isn't really, we're not hearing that much about it. One of the messages that I would want to give to donors is, we want you to see. We want you to see, to open your eyes and look and see what is going on here and the tragedies that are unfolding, and help where you can, however you can. We were in one of our clinics, and a woman in labor who had been in labor for some time sent a family member to come to the clinic and ask for help. We had a midwife and a nurse that went down to the tent where this woman was in labor, thinking they would be able to just do a nice delivery, but it was a situation where the baby was positioned in such a way that she was not going to deliver without some kind of assistance. She was carried out on a stretcher in labor, and when she arrived at the field hospital, the baby was delivered with assistance, and the mom and the babe survived. That's just one life, right? But it is what is more important. So it's this one baby. This baby would not have survived if our clinic had not been there. So when I get myself all choked up, even talking about it now. But if you look at it through that lens, everything that we came here to do is wrapped up in that one situation.
খুশি ইনশাআল্লাহ তো বেশি মায়া মারা যাইতো ইতারা ধরে মায়া জান বসে আল্লাহ বেশি শুকরিয়া আলহামদুলিল্লাহ।
So this was one example of health services, and it's not only us, there are many other organizations providing in that context in Cox's Bazar. You saw some of the photos. I don't know if any of you have been to Cox's Bazar. Any of you have been to Cox's Bazar here? One? Yeah, a couple of colleagues. It's incredible. It's extremely crowded. And right now, the rains have started. You saw the terrain there. It's extremely congested. We all are trying to make sure that some of these facilities survive with the rains now, monsoon season, but also some of these accommodations, which are basically, plastic sittings and tents and some bamboo structures. And moreover, this is also in this path of cyclones. So we're also praying that hopefully the cyclone doesn't come this year. If it comes, none of that will survive. And I wanted to show that on this next slide, because just to show the interlinkage of the health services we can provide in this type of situation, versus a need to support with a very smart and strong logistical capacity behind this. Of course, you see and hear the clinic and the delivery of the baby and saving the life and a very happy grandmother. But to make this happen behind, there is a big logistic machinery that has made it possible. And I just wanted to show the photo of, a ERU field hospital, how it is prepared, how it is stored, and when there is a call to deploy, how quickly they mobilize and deploy these hospitals, and how quickly they set it up. That delivery happened actually in a mobile clinic, which is a lot smaller, and you can ship it generally in one big plane, if it is Illusion 76 or something like that. But the field hospital, the photo here, it requires huge jumbo jets to carry. And to put that together, you need to land, you need to make sure everything is in place, and put it together in 2 to 3 days to make it operational. It requires a massive logistics. And generally, these things are, at least for a month, they are self-contained, meaning that when they get deployed in a situation like Cox's Bazar, at least for a month, they have everything they need with them. From food to themselves, to medicines, to doctors and nurses, to generators, the power supply, syringes, everything they need to be operational for a first month is there with them when they get deployed. And along with them are, of course, the administrators and the logisticians who go with them. And then within that month, they find local solutions as much as possible so that we can sustain this, because otherwise it becomes extremely unsustainable and expensive mechanism. Including cars. These hospitals also come with cars and everything. So logistics behind that is extremely important. So what we see as a health facility in the front requires a massive logistical capacity to put in place. And actually, I think this is a system which generally works very, very well. I just wanted to show you, this is a quote from Margaret Chan, actually from a few years ago. All the donated drugs in the world won't do any good without an infrastructure for their delivery. And that's where the logistics come in place. Okay, she talked about the drugs, but it's not only drugs. It's about these mobile clinics. It's about these hospitals. It's about the people who need to be there, the doctors and nurses, and also the facilities that is required to make some of these functions require a strong infrastructure, and logistics becomes the key to ensure that. I think in recent years, I must say that probably last few years, 10, 15 years, the importance of the logistics is being recognized more and more, also in the humanitarian sector. I think in the militaries, they always recognized it. I think any of you have military background, I don't, but what I hear is that they have always valued the logistics on their work. I think the humanitarian sectors hasn't been that good in recognizing this. I can tell you, 1997, I was a logistician myself. Julie was asking me what's not on the CV. Actually, that's not on the CV. I was a logistician myself. And I can tell you that the value of the logisticians was not recognized as much as it is now. So it's very, very good to see that somehow, from the dark basement to the spotlight, which is very, very good. So the humanitarians are recognizing it more and more, probably not at the same level as the militaries would do, but there is a growing recognition, and just to seeing this room shows that there is a greater recognition, there is a greater investment, and I think the organizations are paying more attention. There is also a recognition that the logistics capacity is needed to reach the last mile. And this is extremely important for organizations like us. Actually, we call what everyone else call last mile, we actually want to call first mile, because as a community organizations for us, it's extremely important that we are there where others consider as the last mile. As you know, historically, the logistician's job was basically to get the goods to the best possible warehouse, and that's where the logistics operations ended. And of course, that was a big mistake. the real value of the logistics operations is to get the goods and the medicines to the person in the community or the family in the community. That's what the last mile is. In the remotest area of Pakistan, when the Pakistan earthquake happened, when the cars couldn't go, you could not drive there, how do you get this support to these communities? That's where the value of logistics comes. So that is being recognized increasingly, definitely in my organizations. We have recognized that, and we are changing some of the systems to ensure that the logistics becomes part of that last mile delivery in our work, in health work, but also in normal disasters and crisis work. But there is also a greater recognition that we need to build a resilient country capacity. And there, I think the recognition of investment on people, and I saw somewhere some colleagues was introduced on the people that deliver here. I saw you guys are investing a lot on the health workforce, the logistics workforce, initiated and hosted by UNICEF, but of course it's a multi-stakeholder initiative, and also recognizing importance of leadership and management on the logistics delivery. Again, if you look at the militaries, they have recognized this, that the importance of a strong leadership and strong management on the logistics delivery system. Where I think the humanitarians and the development actors haven't been at the same level. I hope this is changing. And of course, how do we take advantage of new and emerging technologies? I think the technologies are making a big, big difference. When I was a logistician, the way we were organizing warehouses versus now when I go and visit the warehouse, actually tomorrow I hope to visit our warehouse here in the International Humanitarian City, where you suddenly have a barcodes on the pallets and the boxes. When I was a logistician, those things didn't exist. Some of these improvements, using the mobile technology for tracking of the goods and all those type of things. How can we better leverage some of these technologies is extremely important. And I think it's very, very important that we have more cooperative approaches. The different maturity models from different organizations practicing different things and actually making sometimes the host capacities, host communities and the host governments overwhelmed by these different models. It's important that there is much more cooperation between different actors. And one of the objectives I saw here was learning and networking, and hopefully this conference can promote more cooperative approach on healthcare logistics. I just wanted to show this. This is an example from Nepal earthquake 3 years ago, where I was personally involved as a regional director of International Federation, how the international system came together to support the capacity in Nepal. This is just from the Red Cross. It's just only Red Cross. So every organization, I'm sure, have similar chart and graphs. So you can imagine how overwhelmed the country can be, bringing all these resources in the countries in time. And when the small airport in Kathmandu was congested, when everybody was trying to come in, the value of logistics became extremely, extremely important. How do you organize all these things? How do you coordinate with the authorities? How do you coordinate with the militaries, who are ensuring that the airport is functioning smoothly? And then once things get landed in Kathmandu, how do we get them to some of the very remote villages, which already had a rather weak infrastructure, but of course after earthquake it was even weaker infrastructure. So this was, just to illustrate a small example of how the international system came together and what an important role the logistics played to make it happen. And the importance of this is a preparedness. That was possible because of the preparedness, because we had these tools already ready. We knew, and these tools are interoperable. So although they are located in different countries, you could see in different parts of the world, but these are interoperable. So anybody in Austria would know how that tool will work in Japan or Canada. So these are the tools prepared, people are trained, and the systems are interoperable. And that's what made it possible that we could mobilize that within few days. And these people going there could actually talk to each other in the same language and sometimes even share the resources, people, and sometimes even the medicines they could share, because they are fully interoperable. They are fully standardized. Peoples are trained in exactly the same way. They talk exactly the same language. And we had the logistics behind it in place. Okay, I'm a little bit doing a bit too much propaganda of my own organization, so let me skip it. Some of the challenges in a complex health supply chain, I'm sure you know this much better than I do. Multiple pharmaceuticals, different regulations. Different countries have different regulations, especially on the health medical products. It makes it extremely complicated. Multiple country-specific coding principles, technology costs in warehouse. A lot of times we don't realize that if you want to invest on technology, it doesn't come cheap. And of course the trainings, to make sure that all these things function together, investment on trainings becomes extremely important, and also ensuring that the trained people speak exactly the same language so they can be mobilized. Some of the challenges on ensuring that the quality of the medicines could be ensured, especially in the situations where the infrastructure is not that good. And I think the final point on this list is fostering a green supply chain. That's of course the need of the day today. While we do all these things, we need to ensure that we become greener and greener in our response. As I mentioned before, people, animals, and environment. We need to live in harmony to ensure that the world continues to prosper. And I'm just giving some of the examples of operating in a complex environment, and some of the challenges you face. The congestion, the port congestions. When it is a complex environment, there are many different regions which creates a congestion in the port. Custom clearance becomes a very, very difficult issue. Sometimes you don't even know which is the real authority controlling the customs. But also, when the systems are not functioning, the chances of fraud and corruptions are much, much higher. And how do you ensure that when people are asking you the bribes to make your custom clearance, how do you handle all those type of things becomes extremely, extremely important. Of course, the highly volatile and insecure environment in some of these contexts. How do you ensure safety of your staff and volunteers and equipments? And of course, in many places, there are no direct international access, so you have to use indirect routes. Sometimes you have to use land route, which of course further increases the security risks for people and individuals. Some of these lessons learned we have, and we are constantly trying to improve our systems. But at the same time, what we are also realizing more and more is these are the situations where the collaboration, cooperation becomes extremely, extremely important. Help each other, learn from with other organizations, use their networks and their connections so that we all can benefit from each other's experience. This is where I would like to stop. I have also been looking at the clock, so I have taken my full 1 hour. I just wanted to make sure that these are some of the ideas I'm sharing with you, as I mentioned in the introduction, from a practitioner's perspective. These are really not the expert's view. I know we have many experts now. We'll be talking, and hopefully they can take some of these debates and discussions forward. But I really hope that some of these things will help you in next 2 days to take this conversation forward. With this, I would really like to thank the organizers for this opportunity and to all of you for listening to me for the last 1 hour. Thank you so much.
A poster session coffee break will now take place in the lobby.
Wait
Please
a second.
return.
That was a voice from God. If we can have a couple of questions from the group before we go into the coffee session. So I'm going to wait until I get someone from the class to ask a question. So. I see one in the back. Is there a microphone in the back, or do I need to walk this one back there? I think the microphone is coming to you.
It's okay again. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Thank you very much for your very comprehensive and thank you very much for your very comprehensive and knowledgeable information you have shared with us. I just want to know from you that what is the importance of coordination among different humanitarian organizations while responding to an emergency or a regular program.
Hello, I'm Ali Gharaibi from the Kuna Foundation. Is that okay? Yeah. Ali Gharaibi from the Kuna Foundation. Thank you again, sir, for the great presentation. Just one question, just looking at the structure of IFRC and Red Cross, Red Crescent societies, and mentioning that now one of the challenges is having to work together in a more collaborative mode. Can you tell us more about what IFRC is doing in that regard?
More over here.
Hi, my name is Shira. I'm from Malaysia. I know that we've been talking a lot about operation and everything. I mean, based on the technicalities and everything. My question is focusing on the motivational part of those who work at the field level. Is there any specific training that had been done by the organization to make sure that these workers are actually maintain a certain emotional, because they are facing a lot of incidents in front of them. Thank you.
Can have one more if we have one.
Thanks. My name is Carolyn Hart. I'm with JSI. Thanks for your comments. So much resonated with me. I want to come back to one thing you said, which was it doesn't come cheap. So what are your best arguments for securing the necessary resources for adequate supply chain response and workforce? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the questions. I think the first two ones are really around the coordination and cooperations. I think one was mostly the external and the second was mostly internal. I think for me, I cannot overemphasize the need for working together. You know, the world is crowded with the actors, the humanitarian actors, the development actors. Now the private sector is also coming in a big way. And of course, there are a number of mechanisms that exist. You know, the whole interagency steering committee mechanism. All the NGOs are coming together there. There are private sectors also coming together. There is a collaboration systems there, and I think these are extremely important. But the most important thing is, one is of course the mechanisms working. That's very, very important. But what I have found most important in my now 25 years of experience is people. Cooperation and coordination works or doesn't work is based on people. Systems important, but systems alone doesn't make it work. That's why investment on people, investment on leadership and management, investing on those soft skills which promotes the working of collaborations, which actually makes that some of the system function seems to be extremely important. And so that's why, you know, one thing is you put the systems and mechanisms in place, but at the same time you invest on people's leadership and management ability with those soft skills, which are extremely critically important for coordination. And these are exactly the same things we are trying to do in the International Federation, to your question, madam. While putting the systems in place, but also investing on people's ability to coordinate. Like when I give this example of Cox's Bazar, we have many different Red Crosses and Red Crescents working together there. So we have a very simple, what we call a Red Cross Red Crescent movement cooperation platform, which provides a platform for people to come together, do the joint analysis together. The important thing is to do the joint analysis together, do the joint planning together, and then agree on roles and responsibilities on who contributes what. Shared roles and responsibility. So we're really promoting the concept, what we call now the shared leadership concept. So not divisions of roles and responsibilities. That used to be the standard word before. You divide the roles and responsibilities. But what we found was that promotes this negative feeling. You are dividing. So now we are promoting the concept of shared leadership. We come together and share the leadership. And that's when we are implementing the program. So you have a Canadian Red Cross running a mobile health clinic. The Finnish Red Cross is running the field hospitals. The Turkish Red Crescent, Iranian Red Crescent, Japan Red Cross, all these different are coming together, shared analysis, shared planning, shared responsibility, and having this movement platform to coordinate on a daily basis. Initially on a daily basis, now they do it on a weekly basis, and sharing the outcomes of the reports and things like that. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Because we find that even when you have the best system in place, the individual dynamics, the personal dynamics makes it hard. So that's why having these leaders who have the soft skills, who are able to provide that platform and discussion, continuous improvement is needed. So I think we do reasonably well. Is it good enough? I don't think so. And this is true for the international organizations coming together too. On the issue of the motivations, and this is a very, very important question you ask. What motivates each of us, and how we ensure that our people get motivated? If you ask me personally, this is one of the reasons I visit a lot of our field operations regularly. For me, that's the best motivation to see what is happening on the ground. We had this story coming from Syria. As I mentioned to you, more than 70 Red Crescent volunteers were killed in Syria. We had a situation where one of the volunteers got killed when he was delivering a humanitarian assistance. His body was brought to the clinic, the Red Crescent clinic. His younger brother came to see his dead brother. You know what he did? He took the vest, we have all these red vests in the Red Cross Red Crescent family. That red vest, which was still, soaked in blood of his brother because he was shot. He took that vest out from his brother, he put it on, and he said, now I replace my brother. And I go and continue to deliver because this is my country which is bleeding. These are my people who needs my help. And if I don't do it, who else does it? And that was, when I saw that, I couldn't stop my tears flowing. That's the motivation. A lot of time the motivation is self-motivation. Why you are doing a job, what you are doing. That's my belief that the primary source of motivation is self-motivation. If you are not self-motivated, nobody can motivate you and nothing can motivate you. However, the organizations, the leaders and managers can create an enabling environment where you can continue your motivation. Through support, through caring environment, through training opportunities, through growth opportunities, through providing that, the real opportunities to practice what you are hired for and what your skills are. So that enabling environment can be created by the organization. And it can be done in different way. But the most important thing is the self-motivation. What motivates you as an individual. And I always tell this that I have been in the Red Cross for very, very long, but I have also changed job many times. And for me personally, every day, if I wake up in the morning and I'm not looking forward to go to the work, that's the day I know I need to change my job. I'm not enjoying it anymore. Because that means I'm no longer motivated. So when I'm no longer motivated, nobody can motivate me. And that's when I decided to change my job. So I have changed job, not that frequently, but quite frequently, because I want to stay myself motivated. I think investment on supply chain, and it's a very, very important question. I think for me, what I'm seeing is I was telling you that story of the field hospital. What is seen? Extremely important part, and I'm sort of not trying to undermine in any way what we saw. The doctors and the nurses and the delivery of the baby and all those type of things. Now, what is not seen or what is not promoted by the organization is what goes behind. What has made that possible? And this is where I think the logisticians have done a lousy job in the past. They have done the job, but they are not very good at showing what they do, including myself. I was not very good at it because I was so happy I did my job. I think articulating that importance of that logistics and the supply chain management exactly in the same way as we articulate our hospitals and our delivery systems, for me, is extremely important to ensure that the decision makers who are holding the purse see the value of that. For me, that's the only way. That's the only way. I think there's no other way than that. And of course, also having leaders and managers, I think exposing them to some of these things so they see what happens. So these are not only the cowboys sort of driving the Land Cruisers here and there, but they're actually doing a meaningful contributions to some of the soft delivery we do is extremely important. So I think with some of these things we can change, but again, the change doesn't come overnight. This is sometimes a long process organizations need to go through. But with that visibility and recognition, I'm sure it will start changing.